live. And we're live. Excellent. Hello, all the humans. Welcome to the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix Sunday Speaker event. Please hit the like button and subscribe to get more of our awesome content, or better yet, become a member of HSGP and volunteer for something that fills you with joy. Today, we have Roman Tarasov with Street Epistemology, Improve Your Conversations. Roman is a math and physics high school teacher, critical thinking enthusiast, and an active practitioner of street epistemology. He is also a subject matter expert in the Street Epistemology course development project, practices meetings, host, and a manager of the Russian SE community. With that, please bring a big HSGP welcome. Welcome, Roman.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for having me. It's very nice being here with all of you, so many beautiful people. And yes, I actually come all the way from Russia, Moscow to be specific. And I'm excited to talk to you about this approach that facilitates communication and reflection about any kinds of beliefs, which is called street epistemology. Yeah, that's what it's called, street epistemology. And a couple of words explaining those words. Maybe epistemology is just a branch of philosophy that studies knowledge per se, and street is the word that refers to the fact that it's this approach to facilitate communication is for anyone, and it can be applied anywhere, even in the streets, but not necessarily, of course. Most of our conversations are usually being held indoors and not with strangers. So yeah, don't take the word street literally, and also don't take the word epistemology too seriously. Basically, it's about how we think how we know what we think we know in a friendly manner in everyday situations. That's what it is. So this term, street epistemology, was introduced. It was coined by a philosopher, Dr. Peter Boghossian, in his book A Manual for Creating Atheists, which was published in 2013. And then later it was carried on by some enthusiasts, and they were basically conducting conversations with people and recording them and publishing them on YouTube. And excuse me, since that time, this street epistemology approach has been in rapid development, and the community has been growing ever since. So yes, I'm excited to present it to you today, and hopefully it might give you some new insights about how to improve your everyday communication, especially about beliefs, or deeply held beliefs, anything like that. Yeah, this is an image of how it sometimes being recorded in the streets, but let's cut to the essence of it and talk about what distinguishes this approach from other types of communication about beliefs. And the main idea is, I think, pretty simple and straightforward. Usually people tend to talk about the claims being presented and the arguments for and against them, and each side usually argues for or against some specific claim. And in street epistemology, we suggest and invite people to concentrate not so much on the beliefs themselves, on the conclusions we come to, but more on the methods, on the process of reasoning that leads us to those conclusions. And let me introduce you this image. And you can think about it to illustrate this point. You can think about this as a tree, and it all comes from our brain, which is here represented in the roots. And our brain here illustrates that everything comes from our reasoning processes, from our thinking and psychology and all the rest. And the point is that we can have an unlimited amount of specific beliefs, or you can also think about them as claims or conclusions that we come to. It's an unlimited amount. But how we come to those conclusions is very limited in contrast. And to illustrate, let's take some oversimplified example. Let's think of a person who thinks COVID vaccines are dangerous. And that would be their belief. That would be one of the leaves on that tree, if you may. And we can talk about that, but what we would like to get at in a street epistemology conversation is go deeper and ask why they believe that COVID vaccines are dangerous. And for example, maybe they read a book about it, maybe they read an article on the internet, or maybe they just heard about a case where someone got vaccinated and then they died. So now we know more about it. And now we're moving closer to the root of this, closer to the methods that they use. And we are making progress in this conversation. So we're not just starting to argue as sometimes people intuitively do. We're just trying to understand them first. So you can think, if we know that they have read an article and heard about such a case of death after a COVID vaccine, we're already somewhere in the branches of this tree, but not in the trunk just yet. So now, in order to get even deeper, we might ask next questions about how do they navigate through those presented reasons. For example, do they always just read articles on the internet, and what then do they do? Maybe they listen to their gut feelings. Maybe they listen to their emotional response to those articles, right? So is this the method they're using? We don't know yet. We want to figure that out. So maybe it is just browsing through different pieces of information and evidence and just listening to your gut feelings. Or maybe it's more about how many scientific articles were published on this subject, and whether they were published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. This could be also part of the method that they're using. So that's what we're aiming at. And when we surface this method, what are their sources, and more importantly, how do they navigate through those sources? How do they check their reasons? So by methods, in other words, here we mean figuring out which pieces of information should be influential and by how much for a person we're talking to. And it could be ourselves, of course. We can talk to ourselves. This is part of the beauty of this approach, actually. So yeah, how do we know what we think we know? You can think about that as well as methods. And yeah, I hope this is clear enough. And this is street epistemology in a nutshell. Usually, conversations are being conducted on the level of leaves or maybe sometimes branches of this tree, but it's not very often, at least in my experience, maybe in yours as well, to see conversations conducted on the level of trunks of these trees. And that's what we're aiming at. Yeah, so now there is a lot more to this approach. And right now we're working on a whole text course, which will span, I guess, hundreds of pages. So I will not be able to introduce you to everything that's important here, but my aim here is to introduce you to some of the key components of conducting conversations about beliefs effectively. So let me proceed with that. Some key components of effective street epistemology communication include the following. When we are talking about something, it's easy to start throwing terms, throwing things that you know, pieces of information that we know and that we find important here. But it's usually much more effective to use your conversational partner's vocabulary. And it just wouldn't make much sense to say things like falsifiability or other words like that if you're not confident that they understand it just as well as you do. So here's the first piece of advice: use your conversational partner's vocabulary. And sometimes it gets even funny. So let me share a short personal story. Once I witnessed a conversation between two people, an SC conversation, as it so happened. And a conversational partner has been presenting a belief of hers about how she thinks she should not go to her friends' weddings anymore, because if she continues going to her friends' weddings, she would not get married herself. Somehow, turns out there exists such a superstition. I didn't know about it before that, but it doesn't matter much. And her interlocutor was asking questions, and one of the questions she asked, well, do you care about statistics at all? Is it important for you to know the statistics about such cases? And the answer was no. I actually don't believe in statistics. I don't care about statistics. I just believe it. And the person who was asking questions was visibly frustrated, and the conversation didn't lead much further. But then somehow I ended up continuing this conversation as a questioner. Yeah, usually we can think about two conversational partners. One is an interviewer, you might say, and another is an interviewee. So in this case, I continued as an interviewer, and I also thought that statistics was important, but I just tried to phrase it this same idea in different, with using different words. So I said something like, would it be important for you to know how many people have already gone through this and how many people actually got or not got married afterwards? And the answer was yes, of course. Yes, it is important. And to everybody's, there was an audience there, to everybody's surprise, I've seen eyes widen up, and it was interesting to see how the same question, but using just different words, led us to different results. So that would be one of my advice for you today. Try to use a conversational partner's vocabulary. Try to phrase questions in a manner that would be understandable to them, not only to you, because that's important. Otherwise, you might not get much progress. Another key component is explore their reasoning, not yours. And this might be more difficult to actually implement. It might be easier said than done, because how it usually happens in conversations, we hear a claim or belief and maybe some arguments for it, and our natural reaction usually is to think about why we think it's the case, or if it's not the case, if we disagree with it. And we naturally might want to introduce our interlocutors with the arguments that we find compelling for ourselves, because, well, it is so compelling. I got convinced by it, so you should too. And that's what we naturally might tend to do. But again, a maybe counterintuitive suggestion would be to try avoiding that, to trying to set your ego aside, at least for the duration of this conversation, and try to honestly explore how they are thinking about it. Because chances are what you found compelling for yourself would not be what will be compelling for your conversational partner. Usually, even if we believe the same thing, even if our conclusions coincide, even that doesn't mean that we are being convinced by the same things or even by similar things. Getting back to this tree metaphor, we might use different methods, even if we have the same conclusions, but especially if we don't have the same conclusions we might have. So yes, this is very important. If you want your conversation about your interlocutor's belief to be more effective, try to forget about how you reason about it and concentrate more about how they reason about it, and get to the point. Next key component that I want to talk about is the one I already talked about. It's probably the essence of the epistemological approach. It's exploring the method, not the conclusion. And by method, I will repeat, we can think, when we think about method, we can say ways to check our reasons, ways to assign different weights maybe to the different sources of information or pieces of evidence that we use. Like maybe 90% of my confidence comes from scientific studies that I read about this, and 10% comes from personal experience, or maybe vice versa, or maybe there's more to it than just that. So that would be the methods. And the point is to first surface those methods, uncover them, and then to discuss them in terms of how reliable are they. Can we use those same methods and come to incorrect conclusions? Do they reliably lead us to less wrong conclusions or not? In how many cases? So that's what we are aiming at. And ideally, we're aiming it to, if ever so slightly, to improve our methods, to adjust them, to make them more reliable for ourselves and for our conversation partners. So that's what we're aiming at. And yeah, it again might be easier said than done. But yeah, and another key component I want to talk about is collaboration instead of confrontation, or we could think about it as rapport between conversational partners. So when we talk, if the emotions get high, if it gets triggering for at least one person, if it slides into debates instead of collaborative conversation, then it's probably not the direction you want to go, depending on your goals, of course. But for most goals that you can think of, and we might talk about the goals later today, but if you actually want to create a space, an environment for collaborative and honest reflection about how we form beliefs, about how we should form them, about what conclusions would be most reliable, it will make most sense to just keep to pay close attention to how well you have established rapport and maintained it throughout the conversation. If emotions get high, chances are you better end this conversation at this point and maybe get back to it later. So that's crucial. Without this is probably the something that we can go without. So you can think about it as wants and needs for an effective conversation, and this is what we need is established rapport and a good relationship between you and your conversational partner. So only after having this, we can think about exploring their methods and engaging in all the rest. And last key component I want to introduce you today is aporia, or reflection. This is also important because sometimes, especially if we ask a good question, for example, especially if it's about the methods already, for example, what do you think you would have to learn? What new information, hypothetically, you would have to learn in order to significantly shift your position about this? Questions like this could start the reflection process in your conversation partner or in yourself, maybe if you ask it yourself or if someone else asks you. And this moments of reflections should not be interrupted. That would be the suggestion. For example, if they say, that's actually a good question, I don't know, I'll have to think about it. Or if they do something like this, they look up and to the right and to the left, just pay attention to those moments and don't interrupt them. If a person is thinking, it might be natural for you to want to say, see, so now I hope you see some weak spots about your reasoning, but just don't do that. Again, try to keep your ego aside for the moment and let them reflect. Well, actually, this whole approach is relatively new, as I said, on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's based on some pretty old and established other approaches. First of all, it's based on Socratic questioning, which is more than 2,000 years old, right? Secondly, it's based on the modern scientific method, which has been rapidly developing during the last 400 years or so. And also it's based on our current knowledge of human psychology. So, yeah, on the one hand, this approach is new. And as I said, the phrase was coined in 2013. On the other hand, this approach is an attempt to combine all the knowledge that we have on how people form beliefs, how people change beliefs, and all that's related to it. So yeah, that's that. And now let's talk about common goals that we might want to learn this approach for. And as you might have guessed already, one of them is to just improve the general level of critical thinking in the population. That would be in ourselves, first of all, of course, and in other people around us. At least it's one of the common goals, because what we do with this approach is we try to go as deep as possible to engage in actual critical thinking in everyday situations, in our regular beliefs. And we try to do it in a respectful manner, of course. And that's that. It hopefully it helps a lot. Another goal would be to have less wrong beliefs, because of course we want to make wiser decisions, choices, and we want people around us to also have less wrong beliefs. And next would be to reduce affective polarization. And you might have heard this term polarization, especially in the recent years. It refers to the fact that people from the opposing sides are, well, there's getting less and less people in the middle of some belief systems, like, for example, conservatives versus liberals, and more people on the edges. But it's perfectly fine to have opposing views on something. Of course, it's okay to disagree about something, but what we probably want to actually reduce is what's called affective polarization, which is emotional polarization. It means this situation where not only people have opposing views, but they also start to hate each other or to dehumanize each other. Like that side, how they even dare believe what they believe? It's not good, and they're not good people. So that's what we commonly want to reduce when we do street epistemology, among other things, because of course, without respectful conversation, without genuine respect towards each other, we can go a long way. Yeah, and one of the ways that might help do that is to adopt an attitude of separating people from the beliefs they hold in our head. That means, so if I see a person and they believe something, even if I think their belief is harmful to the humanity, for example, I still can think about them as a person who just happens to hold this belief. So just as I have changed some of the beliefs that I held many times, they can also change the beliefs they hold. But even if they don't, they probably want things, they probably also want what's best for the world and for people. It's only the conclusions that we might differ on. But our root needs and our some human basic characteristics, chances are they are the same. And yeah, let's just respect each other, and that will also help us have more fruitful conversations. Another thing to think about is to just improve your conversation skills. If we learn how to ask more challenging questions, how to navigate through the difficult conversations, it naturally improves our communication skills, and it might help us in all kinds of situations, for obvious reasons, I think. So yeah, that would be some of the common goals that one might think of when figuring out whether to learn this approach or not. Well, I would say that naturally, I guess a lot of people come to and start learning this approach because they want to change other people's minds. And this is, I guess, this is not something bad, because it's a natural part. Changing our own minds and people around us is a natural part of improving critical thinking, engaging in reflective thinking. So yeah, it's perfectly fine to want to change your own minds and minds of people around you for the better, of course, if it aligns the belief system that we hold more with reality that we exist in. All right, so then next I will probably talk briefly about some basic steps of a conversation about beliefs. This is a bit more advanced maybe, but I hope it will also be instructive. Some of the things I already talked about. First and foremost, we have to establish rapport. This should be step 0, we can say, or the step that the concept that should be thought about throughout the whole conversation. If we don't have that, if at any point we think that we have started losing rapport, we should think about ending the conversation and maybe getting back to it later. So that's one of the most crucial things. Then it's usually useful to identify the claim. So getting back to this tree metaphor, how it usually goes is we start with the leaves or with one leaf of from this tree, but that's only when we start. So, and this is coincidentally a step where I guess most of the conversations even end, not only start, but also end. Usually, at least I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, I see a lot of people just arguing about a claim, talking about whether it should be this specific claim or maybe some adjusted claim. And so we can stay on this level of discussing leaves or how they should look like, what they should look like, and for an indefinite amount of time. But we probably don't want that, because we go further. Next is an interesting step, and I don't know whether you have done it, but it's identifying confidence. It might also be a little bit counterintuitive. When someone holds a claim, usually they might think about it whether they believe it or not believe it, whether it's true or not true. In other words, thinking in binary terms. But logically speaking, or mathematically or scientifically speaking, whatever you want, it might be more fruitful and more correct to think in terms of a spectrum, in terms of a range of different points of confidence that we might have. And I can have a 90% confidence in something, and some new piece of information can just move me to 85% approximately, or 50%, but not necessarily turn it from head to toe. So asking about what level of confidence do you maintain for this specific belief that we're discussing now, it might help even to start thinking in those terms. And it also might help you come up with some nice questions like, what do you think would it take for you to increase your confidence or to decrease your confidence? Those would be a couple of cheat questions that we might adopt in different conversations. So it's a nice, it's not a necessary step by all means, but might be nice to have. And we don't necessarily have to think about confidence level in terms of percents from 0 to 100. We could think about it in percents. We can think about it on a scale from 0 to 10. We can think about it even using words. I strongly believe it, or not so strongly believe it. And it will do is just for our better understanding. And also it might help us adjust the expectations from this conversation, because it's one thing if a person says, well, I'm around 80% confident that that's the case because I've read arguments both for and against it, so I'm open. And another case, if they say, well, I'm completely confident, 110%, there's nothing that can change my mind about it, it helps set your expectations. So in the latter case, for example, it would be nice even to talk about just having doubts, like, is it important to have doubts about anything? What could go wrong if we don't do that, and stuff like that. So the whole course of conversation can go a different way depending on the confidence level. All right, so next, and I'm just presenting you right now with an ordinary sequence that you might want to go through in a conversation when discussing deeply held belief. But of course, it's not written in stone, so don't think about it this way, that it's necessary to go in this order or through all the steps. Think about all of those as just tools. Everything I am talking about today, think about it as tools that you might or might not want to adopt in your everyday conversations. So even if you get away from this talk with one or two new ideas or insights about how you can improve your own everyday conversations, I would consider that a success. All right, so next, identifying reasons. That would be, we could think about it as branches on the tree, maybe sources of information or ways that they used to come to the conclusions that they came to. And we want to identify not any reasons, but actually the most influential reasons. Because one of the common mistakes would be to just talk about the first thing that comes to mind. And it just might not be the most important thing. For example, Reed Nicewinder, one of the prominent street epistemologists, has this conversation recorded and published on YouTube, where he asked his conversation partner, why does she believe in God? And first thing she comes up with is, they found the Babel Tower. And what could an inexperienced person do in such a case? Well, they might start arguing against it. They might say, well, really? Babel Tower? Well, that's not the case. I keep track of things like that. So show me this Babel Tower. Where is it? But what Reed did is, what we suggest doing is figuring out whether it was actually one of the main reasons. And he did it like this. He asked, if it was not the case, and I'm not saying it's not the case, but hypothetically, if they did not found the Babel Tower, if you did not think they found the Babel Tower, would that influence your belief in the existence of God anyhow? And the answer was a clear no. And that showed him that this was not the real reason. So the search has to continue then. We want to search for the most influential reasons. And after we've identified the most influential reasons, we might want to proceed to the next stage of the conversation, which might be the most maybe confusing one, or the most counterintuitive one, is to just stay there and maybe even forget about the initial claim. This is also one of the interesting things about it. This step can and probably should be claim independent, belief independent. So it doesn't matter where we started from. You said that you use a method of reading the articles, of looking through scientific studies, right? So let's now think about whether we should be using this method to other beliefs, whether we should use it all the time, or does it have any limitations, this method? So things like that could be discussed. And usually this is a stage where moments of honest reflection may arise, and the ones that we call aporia moments, and that the ones that we don't want to interrupt. So yeah, and after that, basically ending the conversation well will also be important. And actually seeing one of those aporia moments might be one of the good ways to end the conversation. So if you have had a productive conversation, if the rapport is good, and if you ask a question that led to a genuine moment of reflection, consider ending the conversation right there and then. Don't push further, because chances are it might just make things worse. Let your interlocutor just be with it, be with this new thought, new idea, question that they have found for themselves. Let them just reflect on it on their own in their spare time. It's not common to see people actually change their minds during a short conversation, and I guess only the most intellectually prominent people will say something like, "Wow, you have just changed my mind, and thank you very much for that. I have completely rethought everything that I had in mind." So this would be great to hear, but I guess it shouldn't be expected very often. Maybe only from the most experienced critical thinkers, I would say. So this is actually that I think we want to see more, to honestly rethinking stuff, honestly adjusting our confidence, and being happy and thankful when we change our minds. I want to change my mind. So please conduct such conversations with me as often as we can, especially about my deeply held beliefs. So another important takeaway would be to just conduct such similar conversations to yourselves, either on your own, in your own mind, or with the facilitation of some other people who are experienced in this. So yeah, it's not something we do on others, it's something we do with others and with ourselves. Is just a way to engage in critical thinking. And I think I will stop sharing insights with you at this point and just say that this is a rapidly developing approach still. We have there's a website, epistemology.com. We're working on a course. Actually, we have started working on two courses. One is text-based, self-led course. Another is facilitator-led training course. So all kinds of stuff are coming, and yeah, just I will be happy to answer all the questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you happen to like what we do, consider helping out, because yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of people are have volunteered and are working very hard on this, on the creation of courses, improvement of the website, and getting it to the larger audience. So feel free to check that out. And I think I will end at this point, and I will be very happy and excited to hear what you think about it and whether you have any questions for me.
All right, so we've got a question from YouTube from Brian asking, when will the course be available and where?
That's a good question, and short answer is I don't know. but I mean, I know where. You can just check the streetepistemology.com website. It will definitely be there. So you will definitely find it on the website. But as to when, it's more difficult. So right now we're working on it. We have identified around 20 separate topics, separate modules that we call them, to work on. And one module is already finished, but not published yet. And 3 other modules are already near completion, but it's still a lot way to go, obviously. After completing the work on the first 7 modules, we're intending to publish them all at the same time. And we're expecting this to happen somewhere in the beginning of the next year. So realistically, I would say February, but give or take, so no one knows. We're working hard, we're working every week, several hours at least, around 10 people currently on the team of creating this course. So yeah, just...
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. As always, feel free to raise your hand or put the question into chat. With that, I'll call on Roy. Roy, you're next.
Well, there we go. Well, I wonder about wishful thinking. I see this large segment of the population that insists that the last presidential election was rigged or stolen, despite overwhelming evidence that it wasn't. I get the idea that this is a wishful thinking that is so strong that they want to convince other people, even if they really may feel that it wasn't stolen, but they want to convince others. That would seem to me to be that it's awfully hard to deal with that. I'd say, you know, obviously it's been impossible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, first of all, the example that you provided would be a great example to talk about using street epistemology for a claim that the election was stolen. And yes, it is hard. I totally agree with that. No one says it's always easy. And actually, there is no universal remedy, of course. All we're attempting to do is just to increase the likelihood of having a productive conversation, of having our goals met, whatever they are for the conversation. But of course, it will not be something that will always work as intended. At the same time, a couple of words about wishful thinking. We might call it wishful thinking or using any other terms, but I would think that it would be more productive probably to just ask them again for their reasons, for their sources, for their methods, ultimately to understand how they reason. Because I would expect that if we ask a person whether they think it's their wishful thinking, they would probably disagree, right? So that's why I would not suggest using this phrase in an actual conversation, because I would expect it to just get heated and not lead us to fruitful conversation. But at the same time, I understand your point. As whatever we discuss, they might want to just prove their point. And yes, it's how it happens a lot of the times. And actually, there is such a cognitive bias, which is called confirmation bias. We all want to be right. We all tend to pay more close attention to the things that prove us right than to the things that prove us wrong, possibly. It's okay. We just have to account for that. And street epistemology is an approach that attempts to help with that too. So we respectfully engage in a conversation. If we ask them a question, how did you come to this conclusion? And what would they tell us? They will never say it's wishful thinking. They will say probably, well, I've seen the statistics, or whatever the Democrats say it's wrong. And then we can get closer to the methods. Like, is it always the case that whatever they say is wrong? If it's not always the case, how can we distinguish between whether it's wrong or not wrong? Questions like this, I mean, depending on the situation. So just honestly, and try to make those questions open-ended, by the way. So notice that I didn't say, well, actually, there is statistics and stuff like that. I said, do you think that it's always the case? If not, then how do we distinguish between whether it's the case or not? So it's an open-ended question. It's a respectful question. Yeah, things like that might help. If not them, then I don't know what. So yeah, of course, it will never be easy with such topics, especially politics and religion. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that. And you could walk down those steps of establishing rapport, identifying the claim, identifying the confidence, their reasons, and then exploring the epistemology. And I really liked the piece earlier where you said about making our beliefs less wrong, as opposed to making our beliefs right. Right? Because oftentimes we kind of fit ourselves into we're right, you're wrong. And that gives us that little bit of doubt in there as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's a nice catch. I also like to think about it more, not in absolute terms, like there is the absolute truth. I don't know if there is, and if there is, I don't know how to know whether I get there or not. But what I can do and what I want to do is just to think about the reasoning that I use and try to make it most reliable, relatively, of course, but still the best we can do.
So you mentioned earlier that you can use these techniques on yourself and your own thinking. Can you give an example of that? And because I could see that being really valuable in practicing on yourself before you practice on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. When you start learning that, you just start asking yourselves the same questions. So an experienced epistemologist can just say, well, I can surface my own beliefs. So even if I didn't give it much thought in the recent years, I can surface one of my older beliefs and start asking questions. Well, do I still believe it? Should I still believe it? And then how confident am I? What led me to this belief, for example? And we can think about it as updating beliefs. So I should, especially considering the beliefs that are important for me, I want to reconsider them periodically and update them, update my confidence. We can think about it. So it could be anything, like whether I'm not, whether I'm a vegan or not, for example, or whether I support Joe Biden or Trump. It can be anything. It doesn't matter.
Excellent. Thank you. So why do you value street epistemology, and how do you see street epistemology making a difference in the world? Why are you spending your valuable time on Sunday here bringing this to us?
Well, yeah, I hope I made a case why I value it in this talk. And I've always been interested in conducting conversations with people and with thinking about how we can improve the ways we conduct conversations, the way we reflect on things, and the way we help reflect each other. So, yeah, when I bumped into street epistemology, some of the things were more easy for me to grasp, and some of the other things I thought to myself, wow, I didn't think about it this way. So this might actually help me improve how I behave. And I just started implementing it, and seemingly it helped. Of course, it's just anecdotal. If I think it helped me, it doesn't mean that it helped me necessarily, of course. I am far from 100% confident that street epistemology is something that everybody should start learning and spending lots of hours learning. But yeah, just judging from my experience, so from some of the scientific data that I have about how belief formation is happening in human minds, and basically about how scientific method works. And currently we have a rather large body of anecdotal evidence from practitioners of street epistemology, which also points in the direction that it might actually be better than what we're used to, and maybe even significantly so. So that's why. But I'm totally open, and for example, if I not only if but when, and whatever I find, whatever new information I find about this stuff, I'm willing to constantly to change my mind on spot, and to adjust, to implement the other things if they are shown to be more efficient.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Marty, you are up.
Yeah. This is a personal question, but first I want to say I'm going to go back and watch this on YouTube and take notes. Are you the same as Roman Tarasov? Do I have that right?
Yes.
As the athlete?
No, I'm not.
Okay, just checking. And I'd also like to know, did you, your English is, you know, wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Down to the idioms and such. Where did you learn it?
Just here, I don't know. Well, I've been engaged in the street epistemology movement for a year now. We're working on this course, so I use it daily. But I started learning it in
Okay, no, I
childhood.
just wondered. I'm trying
Mhm.
to learn Spanish and I just want to know all the
Oh,
tricks.
oh, yeah. I have some
Uh,
hints, of course, but yeah, that is a whole other subject. Feel free to contact me. I can give you a link to a video that I liked on YouTube that helped me.
oh, hon, I do all that. I actually
Yeah,
teach beginners, but I need better Spanish for myself.
yeah.
Anyway, no, I really am going to go back and take notes, and I'm going to be anxious for your um, course online.
Thank
So
you.
I sorry I didn't mean to bring all that up.
Excellent. Excellent.
No worries.
So, one last question. How have you found people to be most successful working these ideas and goals into their day-to-day conversations?
I'm not sure I understand. How have we find people successful? Can you say it in other words?
Yeah, yeah. So, if I want to start working this into my day-to-day conversations,
Uh-huh.
are there any tips or tricks other than study the steps, study the goals and their key components? Um, Anything that you can provide, such as um, test it out with, I don't know, test it out with a friend.
Yeah, okay. So how to start implementing it, right? Tips and tricks. Well, I guess theory and practice is the basis of any learning, right? So I guess there's no way around it. You have to just learn some theory and then you have to practice it. Just try to implement it and learn from your mistakes. But among the tips that I can think of would be first to watch the videos, some of the videos on YouTube, for example, from channels like Anthony Magnabosco. Anthony Magnabosco is a CEO of Street Epistemology International organization, and he was the first and probably most prominent practitioner. There are just some talks that might help you understand how and why this is so effective. Also, I suggest Cordial Curiosity channel from Read Nice Wonder. He is the president of Street Epistemology International. And I can also share links of about 5 other awesome YouTube channels. So just watching how other people do it might inspire you and motivate you to try that. That's what inspired me in the first place. So I just bumped into Anthony's videos on YouTube and I got hooked up by it, started doing it on my own. Without it, I'm not sure I would be, it would be clear for me that what to do or how to do it. So that would be one tip. Another tip is that we have a community. And for example, there is a platform called Discord. It's a free app. You can download it on your computer. And through Discord, there is a Street Epistemology server there. And practice meetings are being held weekly now, where anyone can just come and either listen to how others conduct conversations and listen to feedback, or to participate on your own. You can participate either as a person who presents a claim, as an interviewee, or as an interviewer, or both. But what's important about it is not only that you get a lot of practice in a safe space, but also that you get feedback. So that's how we actually learn rapidly. That's how I learned rapidly, to be honest, because I started visiting a local street epistemology club, and so we started running it, and we just conducted conversations and provided feedback to each other, even if there's just 6 people, or even if it's just 10 people. Each has their own thoughts and suggestions for improvement, and that's how we learn. you think you hear someone suggest you something, and you think, wow, that's another great question, I didn't think about it, thank you very much, and you start remembering it. And yeah.
Perfect. Do you have can you post a link to the Discord server? Or how can we find that information?
Yeah, should I post it in the chat, in Zoom chat?
Yeah. If you post it in Zoom chat, I'll throw that into the YouTube piece as well.
Okay, I will do that. I will probably need 15 seconds or so.
Okay. Yeah, and so that was really where I kind of wanted to wrap up. Roger, did you have a question?
Oh no, I was just had a little thought on the practicing, but that was covered.
Okay. Cool.
I would like to suggest an HSGP group to do so.
That sounds awesome. You want to be a part of that? I know that Alex having street epistemology was Alex's suggestion, and so I'm certain he would be very interested in a part of that.
I've got a Zoom license. I'd be glad to host something like that too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very useful to just start practicing between each other. It would be something that I would highly recommend against just going out and talking to your relatives straight away about their deeply held beliefs, because you might make some mistakes and it might work even against you if you're inexperienced as of yet. So just practice in a safe place first. And I just posted a link to the Discord server.
Okay. And we have one last question from Philip. The news is full of stories of parents attacking school boards and teachers for teaching facts. As a science and math teacher, have you experienced parents attacking the science you teach?
To be honest, no, never. I tried teaching street epistemology to children at school. I gave a couple of lessons on that, but I have never experienced any criticisms towards science in general or street epistemology, or I mean, not that I haven't heard the criticisms of street epistemology, don't take me wrong. I mean, from parents, not from parents.
Okay. All right. Well, is there any other books, podcasts, sites that you'd like to promote where people can find out more about you? We've got the YouTube links for Anthony and the Cordial Curiosity, as well as the Discord link and
yes.
the main streetepistemology.com site, Street Epistemology International.
Yes, Street Epistemology International is an official name of a nonprofit that exists now. And yes, regarding other suggestions. So here's the name of the second Peter Boghossian's book. It's called How to Have Impossible Conversations. Conversations, not conversation, but this is also a book about street epistemology, and I recommend this book. This is probably the best text version of this approach available currently. Oh, sorry, I just posted it in a personal message to Mary. Yes, let me post it to everyone. Yes. Thank you very much, Mary, for complimenting my English. So there you go, Peter Boghossian, How to Have Impossible Conversations. And I can also post a link to Anthony's channel on YouTube.
I think we've already gotten that.
There you go. And also, I guess, to Reed's channel, which I also mentioned already. Yeah, there it is. Done.
All right. Perfect.
Yeah, that should be enough for start, but also feel free to contact me personally if you have any more questions or suggestions. I'm always happy to help and provide more information if possible.
Awesome. Well, with that, then I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for coming. Thank you, Roman, for coming and giving us this structure and helping to bring us into our day-to-day lives. I am looking forward to doing it and trying it out in a way that doesn't hurt my relatives and my close friends on their deeply held beliefs. So to practice first. So with that, I wish to thank everyone for coming. Remember, if you enjoyed our content, hit the subscribe button, contribute to our Patreon, become a member of HSGP, or better yet, volunteer to make the magic happen. With that, stay safe, take care, and be well.